Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Tharries podcast. As always, I'm joined by a very special guest, and this time I'm joined by Exci.
Hello.
How you doing, Jay?
Oh, I'm great. You know, editing all day, every day just puts you in the mood to not do that for a while. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is the beauty of going on someone else's thing. You don't have to edit it. That's half the beauty of it. Don't get me wrong, I think if editing the right project, editing can be really fun, but a lot of the time it is very tedious. It depends, for me, on what I'm doing.
I'm 3 months in to this edit, so
I guess, that could be a great question. Obviously, anyone who knows you will know, or follows you on Twitter in particular, will know you've been working on a massive Doctor Who Chibnall era critique.
Yes.
This fabled critique. So, I guess, I know you sort of said, rough times before, but have you got a sort of time frame as to when you can expect that to be out?
Oh yeah, as I clearly stated, it's going to be out as Revolution of the Daleks says. So 2 months ago, it's definitely going to be out by then. No, I'm hoping for end of February, around that time, maybe a little later. That depends how long it takes to proofwatch, but it is very nearly done. I'm on the last section now.
This February.
Yeah, not next February.
I was just making sure, because I wasn't 100%, because, obviously, it is a very long 4 hours is, longer than Endgame, for,
That is longer than Endgame.
Which is, you're challenging Mauler there. That's...
Yeah.
That's...
Well, his longest thing is, 18 hours, but...
Yeah, but,
I don't know how he does that.
We'll just say that you're challenging Mauler to make it sound more impressive.
Sure, I'll go with that.
Yeah. To be fair, the longest I've done something is I've live streamed for 8 hours.
I've done exactly the same thing.
Yeah. I don't know why it was 8 hours. I guess I just got started and just couldn't be bothered to stop. And you can watch the whole thing. It was meant to originally be about Revolution of the Daleks airing at Christmas, which has aged fantastically, I might add. But it ended up just being I ended up getting random people on just to talk absolute waffle, and it was a good laugh though. I think that's because they are good live streams to fill gaps in uploads, I suppose, as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Although I never want to convince people that that's all I'm doing now.
Yeah, no, that's the problem, isn't it? You've got to sort of balance, I guess the more chilled content with the content that people expect from you, if you get what I mean, where it's as well, I think for me, if your standards keep getting higher, it's always harder to meet those. I especially find that with this podcast in particular, because I've had people on that, to be honest, I never thought would agree to come on. I always find that I'm trying to one-up myself with that, so that can be quite challenging sometimes. But then in terms of videos as well, I remember I did a video once that was about how Doctor Who has been in a loop since 2010, in terms of its structure. So the sort of, you'd have one series be the reboot, you'd have one series be the gamble, and one series be the sort of middle ground. So the way I thought of it was Series 5 would be the reboot, Series 6 would be the gamble, Series 7 would be the middle ground, Series 8 is the reboot, Series 9 is the gamble, Series 10 is the middle ground, and so on and so forth. But that video did really well, and everyone loved it, and I thought it was good. And then obviously you challenge yourself then to try and match that, and it's harder then, I think.
Definitely, but that's, I find that one of the main rules to stick by for anyone who wants to work in really any creative industry or what's a nicer word for industry that doesn't mean you're doing it because of for the grind, my head is short on that, but just in any creative enterprise, let's go with that.
Yeah. Endeavor.
Any creative endeavor that you're going and you're repeating and you're doing a lot of.
Yeah.
You always want to push your standards higher, not to a point of it being unhealthy, but as you learn, you can afford to have higher standards, and you can, and you always should. You shouldn't I feel that complacency is something that kills off a lot of talent.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because it's like, I mean, just looking like throughout history, like when things die, it's because they refuse to evolve, I suppose. So I think, or like more often than not anyway, like, I guess the only one I can think of would be like Blockbuster, like for example. When
soaps.
Yeah, also, well, soaps though. Soaps are in that like weird nebulous corner where they still survive despite not really changing. They're like the one exception to the rule where they'll just survive throughout anything. I reckon the heat death of the universe will come around, and Corrie will still be on, as will like EastEnders and all the other ones. But I suppose we've sort of started to talk about YouTube a bit anyway. So I wanted to ask you, how did like your YouTube channel start? I mean, I know that you were a Sins sort of channel parody to begin with, but like, why don't you just tell us a bit about like how that came around?
So, the oldest videos on my channel, I was like 11, but that doesn't really count. I don't count like the anniversary of my channel from when I first made it. I count it from the Sin stuff.
Yeah.
So I started as a CinemaSins parody, sort of, where I would take CinemaSins videos and I would apply the CinemaSins format to CinemaSins videos in what I called CinemaSins Sins, where I would take a CinemaSins video, I would pick out a criticism from their video, and I would either criticize it in turn or make a joke about it or something like that.
Yeah.
There are 150 episodes of that series.
Wow, I didn't know there were that many.
The thing about that is it was very easy to make more of because I didn't have to come up with an idea for the next episode. I didn't have to really think about what I was going to do next. If I was really stuck on what to do next, I could literally just choose a video and go, I'm going to do that one, and then go and watch the film it's based on, and then make my video on it.
Yeah.
And that was I found a really useful format to start because it was a format that allowed me to be creative, but while also I could always do new and interesting things with it if they occurred to me, but I would always have a baseline where I could make new stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to start out, like getting a format that you're comfortable with as well.
Definitely.
I think is a great way to start because I know at least with me I didn't have that. I was kind of just throwing eggs at the wall and seeing what stuck essentially. And like obviously it's only now where I'm starting to pin down like what the things that I'm good at are and how I like operate. But that's a very good way to start to have that idea in your head initially. I think I was going to say as well in regards to me finding your channel, I think I remember like your Watch Mojo video getting recommended to me like a bunch back when that came out in like, was it 2019?
I'm ashamed to have to ask which one.
The Watch Mojo attempts to argue Doctor Who Series 11 is good.
Oh, that one. That makes sense, actually.
Yeah. That was like all over my recommended for a good long while. And then I saw you doing live streams with Stu, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I need to check out Exci now. And then I watched that video, and I think I've been subscribed ever since, as far as I can recall. But that video, like, it was... Do you know, like, when you get one of those senses of vindication, where it's like everything that you think just gets, like, put onto screen, and it's like that sense of almost, vindication for your, like, opinions and stuff like that. It's how I imagine people felt when, like, the Daleks were, like, done well in Dalek, and, like, they were able to climb stairs, and they were able to, like, sucker people's, like, brains. All the, like, lazy criticisms of them were, like, successfully rebutted.
Yeah.
Like, similarly, like in that video, all of like the lazy things praising Series 11 that like I didn't think were like valid, or at least a lot of them weren't like valid like points of praise, like which is successfully rebutted, and I think that's where I was like, yeah, this is good stuff, good shit.
Well, in terms of that, like in that kind of thing, I think I fill a niche. I didn't climb into this niche deliberately, but I do think I can attribute a lot of what I have now to existing in this niche of saying things like season 11 and 12 of Doctor Who, I'm going to argue the point, are complete garbage. Like, and to a very clear degree of like right to the core. They are fundamentally broken. And like I guess we can get into the nature of like what degree opinion is, how deep an opinion goes, and when it starts being not an opinion and more so a reasoned conclusion, and then an objective fact. There are 3 layers of preference, reasoned perspective, and objective fact, and we can get into that if you want. I don't know, but
I'm down. We got time.
Before that, the niche itself though is like saying this stuff is all just like awful when it comes to like I've done that with the new Star Wars trilogy as well, and like the new Terminator film, without complaining about the SJWs. Them, because I don't do that, and I don't like doing that, and it always it rubs me the wrong way when I see people doing that.
The reason.
So that's the niche, I think.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's one of the reasons I really appreciated your channel and channels like yours, because fun fact, I started like making stuff when I was like 15, and I sort of accidentally fell into the sort of those type of fans, if you get what I mean. It wasn't deliberate, it was just a case of I was stupid, and the only people I saw who had the same opinions as I did at the time were the people saying those things, if that makes sense. So
it's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I inadvertently, accidentally became a Not My Doctor. And it's something I've regretted ever since. But I realised, through watching channels like yours, that that's not the reason I dislike it. That's not the reason I dislike what I dislike. The reason I dislike it is because of, the writing and etc. But, yeah, so that's, I think, why I appreciate those videos, because they showed me in a way that's not the only way you can be critical of, especially like the current era of Doctor Who, but it applies to everything.
Yeah. And I hope to as well, with what I'm doing, provide a space for people who think that this era is complete garbage, who despise it completely with every fiber of their being, or even quite like it and just want to know what the criticisms are. All manner of opinions are, people I want to hopefully appeal to with what I'm making here.
Oh, absolutely.
Because this is definitely an explanation of the issues that people take. But I've my train of thought. Hang on, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
What was the question? What were we just talking about 30 seconds ago?
We were just talking about how like a genuine criticism of like the current era of Doctor Who is like important compared to like the criticism about SJWs.
Oh yeah, so I do hope to provide a space for people who really do take issue with what's been put on screen, but who don't have awful political takes.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. I'm the same, to be honest. Like, these days, I mostly stay out of like the politics stuff altogether, because quite frankly, like I've never enjoyed talking about politics. It's just not something that appealed to me, and like the only reason I keep up with it these days is because it feels like it's so important to now, especially like in the world we're living in. But I think certainly it's important, I feel, to separate, at the very least, your own biases to like the actual like criticism of it. Because when you frame your own personal biases as objective criticism, you start to like conflate the two, and I think that's why a lot of people who enjoy the current era find criticism of it to just be, like, from what they've seen anyway, to just be baseless, because they just have biased opinions and then they frame them as if they're objective facts. And I think that's why a lot of people don't really take criticism of the new era seriously, despite the fact that there are great criticisms of the new era out there, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's sort of, I mean, I don't I don't hope to improve the image of those people who are doing that.
No.
But I do hope to improve the image of criticism of this era with what I'm doing.
Oh, I do. Yeah, no, like it's one of those. It feels as though, like, for a long time, it felt as though the only people who were called out for being toxic were the people who didn't like it. And now, well, at least I've tried to point out that no, people who are positive about it can be just as shitty.
Very much.
As people, not like maybe as people's a bit harsh, but like they can be just as mean about it and just as mean spirited about it as the people who dislike it. And I think that's something I've really like felt passionately about because as well I've got that weird dynamic where I've seen it from both ends of like the spectrum, if you like, because I was like a hard like NMD and stuff, so I've seen their like toxic stuff, but then equally I've been on the receiving end of the positive people stuff who hate me because I dislike it, so I sort of have that like balance where I've seen both of the extremes.
Well, I'll tell you that that video I'm sorry, that Watch Mojo video that we were talking about just a little while ago, not regularly but occasionally gets comments that just paint me, just call me a not my doctor and say oh, it's easy to get hate clicks when you just complain about SJWs, and I'm there thinking, have you watched the video?
Yeah. It's like that's completely not what's in the video. Like, like I've had like those comments as well, and there is a by some people there's a desire to paint any criticism of the era as just NMDs. And unfortunately, there are a lot of legitimate criticisms that come from everyone, not just NMDs. Like I talk to plenty of people who like it, but even they acknowledge that it has massive flaws, and that's the same with me. Like my favorite Doctor is 11, but I acknowledge his era has a lot of flaws. But I appreciate the way he's characterized. And people always say, well, you think 13 is too quirky, but you like 11. And I'm like, well, yeah, but 11, it wasn't just that he was quirky, it was that there was something behind that was explored thoroughly. With 13, that's all there is. It's very surface level.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I've just finished my dissection of her character. That was the And there's like I've got quite a while on that, and it really is. There is a surface, and then there's sort of beneath it, there are deeper traits, but none of them are what you would expect from a Doctor.
Yeah.
There's this very different sort of base character who leads to something that's quite similar superficially to previous Doctors in the quirks and the embellishments. But what's beneath there when you scratch the surface is this more sort of this more sort of nervous and genuinely awkward person who is quite self-conscious, which is very, very different from the core we've had before.
Yeah. And like that's, I think, a nervous sort of person, like the Doctor being a more nervous sort of scatterbrain type person, I feel like could work. I just don't think it's like executed particularly well. Because I was saying this to like a friend the other day, it feels like someone who's trying to be awkward rather than someone who's actually awkward. And I'm not sure whether that's down to the writing or Jodie's performance or a combination of both. It's probably a combination, but it comes across when someone has to say that they're socially awkward out loud, it doesn't give me the most vibe that they are in fact socially awkward. That and the fact that like she is very confident in just like taking down villains easily and shit talking them like every other Doctor has done. It's like that's not really something. I don't know.
She's completely back and forth on that, because a lot of the time when she's talking to villains or interacting with villains, or just there are villains around, she is genuinely really nervous, and you see this in Demons of the Punjab, where even before she knows what she's dealing with, she's just found the alien ship and she's in it.
Yeah.
She seems genuinely really terrified of the notion that there are aliens around and she's not sure what they're up to. And she talks and she keeps like talking in this really nervous way and then explicitly says, I'm talking to like confront my latent worry. And you're like, Sometimes she turns on the confidence, but there are loads of instances that you can point to of her being really nervous in pretty like what is for an episode of Doctor Who mundane situations, like, you know, some guy is pointing a gun at her, and he doesn't know who she is.
Yeah.
He's like, what are you doing here? And she's really nervous.
Yeah.
That's in Battle of Ranskorath Colossus, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I know the thing you're about. Yeah, no, I definitely do get that sense from it. I guess I just wish in some cases it was a bit more like subtle in the way it was done. Because to me it feels like, obviously using the 11 example again, it feels like if 11 went, oh, I'm an old man trapped inside a young man's body, like out loud, it would detract a lot from that character for me.
That's a really common trope in this era as well, is the characters saying exactly what they want you to pick up, either about themselves, about other characters, or about the situation or the themes of the story.
Yeah.
The characters in this era are so often used as vessels to just tell you what you're supposed to be taking away from the story.
You use micro-implants to hide your DNA, to hide your mind, even from yourself. That's why the Sonic couldn't pick it up.
Egregious example of this is, I think, actually in one of the best episodes, it just does this so much, is in Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror.
Okay.
Where just every moment a character just takes some time out to explain to you, here's what's going on and here's what you should be taking away from it. Like, every time, this is my favorite one, every time like Tesla says anything clever, Ryan will say, well, that was clever, that thing you just said. Because like the episode is all about how underappreciated Tesla was. So Tesla will go, you see this, you see how it moves independently? I believe this is something I like to call remote control. And then like a Davies era episode, I feel would trust the audience to go, oh wow, he's like, that's really ahead of his time that he thought that.
Control, yeah.
But in this era, we have Ryan then go, wow, remote control. You came up with the idea for that?
Yeah.
Thanks, story.
I think, like, as well, sort of following on from that, this era has, like, a real problem with how to deliver expositional dialogue. Because, like, good expositional dialogue shouldn't feel like expositional dialogue, at least to me. It should feel like a natural thing that happens. Whereas in this era, it feels like there are moments where it's like the Doctor is now going to deliver exposition about what's going on, despite the fact that it may not even relate to the situation they're in all the time. And it feels very jarring to me sometimes.
Well, I feel like it is just sort of that sort of vague memory that Doctor Who has a lot of technobabble in it, because sometimes you do get this expositional dialogue that sounds and feels and is like structured exactly like expositional dialogue. That's here's what the audience has to know so they understand the plot, and then the information never comes up for the rest of the story.
Yeah. Chibnall stories have a weird tendency to like bite off more than they can chew, I find, and then things that are established just sort of never get brought up again, and you're like, oh, this is a completely different story as to what it was 10 minutes ago.
Definitely.
Okay, and I think Revolution of the Daleks actually is probably one of the biggest examples of plot threads just being picked up and dropped, like, with reckless abandon, like, whenever it's sort of convenient for the plot, or, you know, whatever Chibnall's trying to write. It's like, so, like, the prison is, like, a perfect example of that. Like, why was the prison even a thing in the first place when it's just going to be dropped immediately? That was just, like, to me, when I watched it, I was like, huh. So that was a waste of time. That's like generally like what
the prison arc literally does not affect anything about the story.
Yeah.
If you cut that out, okay, you need a different way to introduce Jack.
Yeah,
sure.
You could do
but
that easily.
He can just show up. that's fine. Like,
I mean, he's literally got a teleporter, so he could just teleport to Earth. It's not.
And then in terms of people, I think the main thing people will point to is like, no, but you need it for this reason. Is that the Doctor gets back to Earth really late, and so the Doctor is separated from the fam, and then she gets back to Earth really late, and she has to they have to explain to her that she's been gone for like 10 months or something.
Yeah.
And so she was separated from them in the TARDIS anyway. She then gets taken to prison and then escapes and goes back to them, separated from them back to the TARDIS, separated from them.
Yeah.
So you could have just written the same plot point, but without the prison stuff. The only actual effect it has is that when the Doctor is talking to Ryan, she says, "I've had some time to think."
Yeah, it's like, wow, that was a real good plot arc there. And she also ends up coming out exactly the same as she did in the last story as well.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I've heard you criticize 12's run because he's wildly different in from season to season.
Yeah.
Whereas Jodie is exactly the same in like every episode, even though there's stuff that should be wildly influencing her, which is a really weird shift.
I think there are like instances where she's very inconsistent between episodes, because I feel as though, like, not just like morally, but just in her like personality. Because there's obviously that famous like line about loving conspiracies, and then in like the next episode she despises them, and then there's like, but like even outside of that, you'll have like episodes where she's like the typical happy-go-lucky type character, and then you'll get to like Ascension of the Cybermen, where she's just like shouting at the companions. I'm like, you can't. I mean, you can be both, but it's got to be explained. Like, you can't just flip-flop between one or the other.
Ascension of the Cybermen is sort of what she should have been after Gallifrey was destroyed. It's like she knows she's in a serious situation now, and she's really bothered by what's going on around her.
Yeah.
No. And then they pretend that they're doing character development in the rest of the series by having occasional scenes where the characters tell her she's been grumpy recently.
Yeah.
And that's not. I'm not exaggerating either. That's literally in Orphan 55. There's a moment where, and the only moment. This is the episode directly after she finds out that Gallifrey has been destroyed.
Yeah.
The only moment that alludes to that arc, in any discernible way, is Yaz going, "You've been in a Marty mood."
And she's like, "I'm not in a mood." And then they just carry on as if it's normal. It's so strange. Like, it's bizarre. Like, the inconsistencies of her character while simultaneously not really growing at all. It's the most completely consistent character to ever exist. But no, with 12, it's like, I think, no, like, with 12, it's, he's consistent within his own series. Like, in what series he's in, he's consistent to that series' characterization. It's just, you know, once he goes to the next series, it's like a Pokemon evolving to me. It just changes again. And like, people argue that, but it's all about the midlife crisis thing. I'm like, I don't think that was the plan, though. It's always felt very jarring to me, going from Series 8, that's very dark, and he's very brooding and very sort of just different completely to what we've had before, to Series 9, where it's like he's trying to be Matt Smith. It's bizarre to me.
I've never understood the midlife crisis argument to justify how he behaves.
Yeah.
Because he technically, yes, he is in the middle of what you would consider like his current lifespan. He is it's like his 14th incarnation, and he's just been granted a new set, so he's halfway through the regenerations he has. Okay, that's technically true, but it's more like you've hit 90 years old, and then some miracle like actual medical doctor comes up to you and says, I've found a way to rejuvenate you to like 18.
Yeah.
And they give you that magic treatment. You're not going to have a midlife crisis. You're going to have you're going to feel like you've got a whole new lease on life, and you can be reckless and crazy and do all that stuff that you've been avoiding in your old age.
I think part of it is just that, like, Moffat had a weird obsession with the Doctor wanting to die, or dying, like,
he
did in
did.
general, and it's like, personally for me, and this is controversial in itself, but I actually think the best execution of that is Series 7B, which isn't generally hailed to be one of the best parts of, like, New Who, but I think certainly thematically, there's this great, like, sense of it being cyclical about it, where it's like he takes Clara to the first place, one of the first places he took Susan, and he's sort of having one last big, you know, like, sort of tour before it all ends, at least in his mind, because he's on his last incarnation.
Yeah.
And I think that works really well, whereas, like, in the things both before and after that, I just think it's executed less and less well.
It is a shame about a lot of the other stuff in Series 7B.
Yeah. Well, like, that's the thing, because Series 7B is as inconsistent as it is, I think people don't tend to realise how good it is in terms of the Doctor's characterisation. I think it's done really well, because it's, as well, in terms of it being cyclical as well, like, the Snowman is almost, in a way, a direct parallel to An Unearthly Child, where we meet the Doctor, he's moping alone, and he's just sort of spending the rest of his days alone on Earth, and then he finds these people, and he goes out again, and I think that's, like, I think it's just really well done, and it's the subtlest way he does the death arc, and I think it's my favourite way he does it. It's just, as you said, it's the same about the rest of Series 7B.
Yeah.
Like, that's, like, for me as well, with 11, that's why I'll sort of, because with his era, I acknowledge there are a lot of weak stories, but what keeps me going back to that era of the show is that I'm engaged in the characters. I feel like I can give, like, weaker stories a lot less, like, I can give them a lot more slack if they do something interesting with the characters, or they, you know, have characters that I'm actually interested in. Unfortunately, this era doesn't have that to fall back on, so
Yeah.
it really shows the poor quality of the stories. Whereas, like, I suppose with 11's weaker outings, because those characters are always strong to me, it sort of, it raises up what would otherwise be average stories.
Well, definitely. Even with, I think also it detracts from what would have been the stronger episodes in the 13th Doctor's era, is that the characters are just piss.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no built-up connection, probably, between a viewer and the characters on screen. If that connection isn't there, and you're seeing them in a really well-crafted high-stakes situation or whatever, you're not going to care as much.
No, exactly. I think one of the best examples of that, and I ought to make just like a video talking about this, but one of my favourite episodes of the revival is Amy's Choice. Because I think that does so much to explore those characters and what they want and what their motivations are. But that episode would only work if we knew who those characters were. Contrastly, you have Can You Hear Me, which conceptually is very similar, but in execution is wildly different because we have no idea who these characters are. So as a result, all the dreams either come across as really vague or just like showpieces for like the future arc. In 13's case, it's literally just, ooh, look, timeless child. Whereas with 11, you literally have the embodiment of all of his demons chiding him throughout it. And that says so much more about 11's character than teases towards the timeless child ever said about 13's. Which is why I think they're a really good point of like comparison between those two eras in particular, because they're both very similar conceptually, but they both have severely less characters. They both have severely worse characters in Can You Hear Me's case.
I mean, with Can You Hear Me, I feel like the best reaction that you can get about it, if you really if you really dissect the characters, the biggest thing you can take from It Takes You Away is, well, I guess that's something they're really scared about.
Yeah. Exactly, and it's like I think it speaks volumes as well as the fact that that episode came like 18 episodes into their run on the show. Comparatively, Amy's Choice came 7 episodes in, and we knew more about Amy and Rory and the Doctor's dynamic in those 7 episodes than we do about all 4 of those characters in like 17 or 18 or however many I said earlier. And I think that just speaks volumes about how just we don't know who these characters are. And that's why it feels empty in like Revolution, where they have all this fanfare and they leave, and it's all meant to be all sad. And you're like, well, I don't really know who you are yet. And you go on.
Yeah.
And it's like,
People attribute this as well to there being too many companions.
Yeah.
And I would first of all point out that there is one more than we had in that series.
Yeah.
We've gone from 2 to 3, but secondly, it's not so much that there are too many, I would say, but the fact that when you actually get into the story, all you are given is plot rather than characterization. And you can characterize a character through how they interact with the plot. But in Chib's stories, they generally just don't do that. They will, whenever a difficult moral decision comes up, what will happen is the fam will stand around as the Doctor decides what they should do.
Yeah.
Like that whole scene in Kablam where the Doctor is going on about how she makes all of these different moral statements, it's wrong to kill people, innocent people for your cause. I'm guessing they all agree with that one. But then loads of statements about how the systems aren't a problem and all of this. And Ryan and Graham and Yaz are there for that whole scene. And the only line that any of them get is when Charlie sets off all of the Kablam robots to kill all the innocent people. Ryan yells, "What have you done?"
Oh my, yeah. And that's what's so weird about that, is that I believe it's established in that episode that he worked in a warehouse. So surely you'd think that he would at least have something to say. Maybe he could draw some parallels to like his own life and his own experience working for a shitty company. But no, that never plays a factor. And I think another example of that as well is Fugitive of the Jadoon, where you literally have the space police and Diaz in the same episode, and they don't do anything with that. And I'm like, why have a police officer companion if that's never going to play a part in any of the stories? Like, it speaks volumes to me that Amy Pond, as a kissogram, feels more like a police officer in that one episode than Yaz has ever felt like a police officer to me. Like
this... Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say as well, like in Arachnids in the UK, you have Robertson literally getting his guard to point a gun at Yaz, which is illegal in the UK, and she is meant to be a police officer, and she never says anything about this. She just...
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, she just goes, oh, okay, come on then. It's like, what? You're a police officer. Arrest him. I'm like, what are you doing? You're a police officer. It's so weird.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. I didn't know about that lore, I suppose. So, yeah, I guess any police officers watching that must have been... or, any, I guess, lawyers or police officer or anyone who actually knows that must have been really pulled out by that.
Well, yeah, like, that's literally her job, is to stop people pointing guns at each other, and her first response is just not to do anything. I mean, maybe this is why she's always, like, on constant parole by her police force people, is that it's like she like, just forgets that she's a police officer half the time. But I think that's even me giving them too much credit.
This episode has this era even has a really weird relationship with police, I've noticed.
Yeah.
It really likes them, like, a lot.
Because even Brendan's a police officer, isn't he? And
oh yeah, he is. Well, I feel that's metaphorical for the Division.
Yeah, could well be. Like law enforcement or time enforcement.
All of these little weird things that you notice is just patterns where, Yaz is a police officer, and any she's never like questioned for anything she does as a police officer, and she does do a bad thing on duty, which I guess I don't really want to like get into everything that but it's like she's always presented favorably as a police officer. Then you've got Can You Hear Me? You've got the story about the other police officer who inspired her, and is like this almost sort of this absolutely like idealized presentation of a police officer who sticks out all of the rough parts of the job because they just love helping people so much, and inspires this runaway kid that they're saving to become a police officer as well. And then all the way down to these weird, like really little details, like in Fugitive of the Jadoon, where the Jadoon arrive, and the Doctor says, "We've got to go and help. They're going to be." First of all, I mean, it's like this. So the Doctor says, "We've got to go and help. They could be causing some real damage down there." And Graham says, "Well, I thought you said they were police." And the Doctor has to specify that she means trigger-happy police. And I'm like, I don't think he would have got that line in a Davies episode, because I don't think that the Davies era would have felt the need to specify that it's possible to have bad police.
Yeah, no, it's what I find especially ironic about that is the fact that for an era that's frequently lambasted for being the most politically correct one, they glorify the police force, which is like the most questioned it's ever been ever, like at the moment, which is I find especially ironic. But on like the politics thing as well, like obviously as I said, I don't like to do too much about politics, but I personally think that I personally don't think it's too politically correct. I don't know whether I necessarily agree with The Guardian in the sense that it's like the most regressive it's ever been, but I think certainly like it's not. I wouldn't call it progressive. I would call it more. It wants to be progressive. It wants you to believe that it's progressive.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really put any of the mileage in, if that makes sense.
It really wants you to think that it's progressive and now.
Exactly.
Which is why I think people who don't. Which is why I think all of the SJW kind of complaining crowd, the anti-SJWs, that's what they're called. It's a pretty simple name.
Yeah.
Will point at it and say that it's too woke, because these people don't generally read deeper into the stuff they're criticizing, and you can tell if they don't, if they say that this era is too woke, because it's not woke at all. It is more so, unless they use the Urban Dictionary of woke, which is hang on, let me look it up very quickly.
Okay.
So the Google definition of woke is like particularly conscious about social issues, particularly racism. The Urban Dictionary definition, which I am about to find, is let's see, the act of being very pretentious about how much you care about a social issue, which I think you could certainly apply to the Chibnall era.
Yeah, no. Because I've done a video before on ableism in Doctor Who, because that's naturally an issue close to my heart at the very least. And it's obviously part of it was about the community and stuff I've had to like endure, I suppose. And then like the other part is how the show sort of actively endorses this type of behaviour, and I use two recent examples. Number one is the blind girl in It Takes You Away. Now a lot of people praised that characterization and that character, and while I will give credit for the fact that she is the one to sense that the weird dimension is all weird, for lack of a better term, she also like falls into like the tropes of have to be the one that's like protected and has no sense of like agency of her own whatsoever, and is pretty much just there so that the main characters, i.e. the able-bodied characters, have someone to like look after, I guess, which is like, I mean, I don't think it's particularly good representation, but I mean, to each their own. And then the other example obviously is like Ryan, where he has like disappearing dyspraxia, which sort of appears and disappears whenever it's convenient for the plot. And again, I mean, I wish like things of mine would just disappear, but unfortunately they don't. And I think to paint something like that as something that just disappears, like, that's not particularly good representation to me either. And a lot of the comments I got on that video were like, well, he actually worked with the Dyspraxia Foundation, and one of his kids, I think, maybe has dyspraxia. And I'm like, well, yeah, but, like, that doesn't... Just because he worked with them doesn't automatically mean that it's written well.
It is an objectively true statement that in the Ghost Monument, he headshots several alien robots very quickly without, like, in a very, like, natural and fluid way.
Yeah. And the only justification we get for it is Call of Duty.
He plays COD.
It's like, what? I mean, I've played Super Mario Brothers, but it doesn't mean I'm, like, able to jump and go through pipes. That's another thing as well. For some of these episodes, like, it's really obvious that it's written by a boomer.
It's got intense boomer energy.
Like, yeah, like the COD line is an example of that. The internet line is probably the most famous one. The Wi-Fi family.
Oh yeah,
it's probably like the most famous like one of that, because it's like I can imagine my parents saying that, you know, where it's like, oh, you'll have to have a conversation without your electronic device. It's
the vlogger characters in Praxeus.
Yeah, that's another one. How they're really vain as well, and like don't care about anyone.
They're fake, egotistical, assume that you should know who they are. It's just, this is boomer time.
Yeah, and I think like that comes across to me as particularly patronising, and probably a lot of other people as well who are sort of, you know, younger, just in general, sort of from like teens to like mid-20s. Probably most people would find that kind of insulting, but at least of their intelligence. And an argument I've seen for like in favour of why the Chibnall era feels so dumbed down is that, well, it's the kids one. It's meant to appeal to the kids, and I'm like, but you can have Doctor Who appeal to kids while simultaneously offering something of value to
every era appeals to kids.
Yeah, like I think, you know, if you want a good example of that, probably the RTD era is a great example where it's very appealing to kids. It was when the merchandise sales were probably at their peak, and yet still it offered something for adults. It didn't always land all of the time, but I think you do have deeper, like, it's not surface level, there's deeper things. Like, for example, Fires of Pompeii on the surface looks like just another historical romp type thing, but then it becomes this very deep exploration of, are you able to save people if you go back in time? It's one of those moral questions that, like, isn't touched on that often in, like, science fiction. Like, is it okay to do that? Or do the consequences of doing something like that outweigh the positives that you would have done? But at the same time, it's like, they're people, and you want to save them. It's a really, like, nuanced discussion of that. But it still manages to appeal to kids. And I think, like, that's something that this era completely misses, is that it thinks that to appeal to kids, you've got to, like, dumb it right down.
Kids aren't fussy. I mean, kids are fussy, but, like, in really weird ways. Like, kids aren't going to go, oh, I'm not watching this. It's got monsters in it, but it's also got deeper themes beneath the surface. Kids aren't going to do that. Kids are going to go, oh, I don't like this. The monster is yellow.
Yeah.
Like...
Exactly. I mean, like, I've always said this. My first episode was The Next Doctor, which is a story that is more probably lore-heavy than the majority of RTD outings, I would probably say. Because you've got the idea of an alternate Doctor, and, like, you know, the info stamp shows all the different incarnations. But at no point was I like, oh, yes... This explores themes of the past and potential future timelines. I don't like this. I was just like, Cybermen dogs. You know, it's I don't think, you know, kids aren't, as you say, they're not that picky, and they're also smarter than I think this era gives them credit for. It's that, like, it's the thing of what, like, a lot of cartoon, like, companies do, where it's like they think in order for things to appeal to kids, they've just got to be bright and colourful and, you know, flashy. Which, I mean, it's probably the perfect way to describe this era as well. I mean, if we want, like, adjectives to describe it, you know, even in the way 13's dressed, she's very deliberately made very bright and colourful, and the title sequence is very bright and colourful, even more so now in, like, Revolution, because it's got, like, a little rainbow lens flare on it.
It has got rainbows on it now.
Yeah, to make it even more colourful and distracting for kids to watch. And it's just like, kids are more mature than that. But then equally, you've got the argument that it's for kids, while simultaneously in Series 12, you reference the Morbius Doctors. And it's like, I don't know any kids who know the Morbius Doctors. I don't know any 10-year-old who's going to be like, that's Philip Hinchcliffe dressed as the Doctor. It just doesn't happen. Like, if there's any 10-year-olds in the audience who know who the Philip Hinchcliffe Doctor is, I'm sorry, this isn't aimed at you, but the vast majority aren't going to know who Philip Hinchcliffe is.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I am listening to and agreeing with this, fully aware that as a child, I would have been able to point to the timeless children and go, those are the Morbius Doctors.
Yeah. I'm just
I guess I was raised different.
That's the like not going to be the majority of children who end up watching that episode. So yeah, like this era has a really like weird thing where I don't think it knows who it's for, and then it ends up being for nobody as a result. It's like for everyone and nobody at the same time, and like people would argue, well, isn't Doctor Who meant to appeal to everybody? And I would say yes, but each time it does it in a different way, and a way that is specific to that person who's running it. RTD, he quite likes, you know, the more soporific aspects and the more family drama type aspects. So as a result, you get a lot more time spent with Rose's family, Martha's family, you know, Donna's family, etc. Moffat is more about the grand fairy tale and the, you know, the mysterious like arcs and things like that. So as a result, you get a lot more fairy tale whimsy and mystery. Whereas with Chibnall, it doesn't feel like he has his own thing. It feels very homogenous. And, like, all the components are there, but none of, like, the creative spark, if that makes sense.
It's this weird balance of, like, it doesn't feel like there's a creative spark behind it, but also at the same time, I feel The Timeless Children is fully fan fiction he wrote when he was, like, 15.
Oh, yeah,
and just wanted to make canon for, like, you know, since then.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's really strange because I think he knows that in order for... Because obviously he's written for a lot of television before. I think he knows that for television to reach wide audiences, it's got to be, like, as... I mean, in his mind, it's got to be as, like, uniform and, I guess, back to basics and simple as you could possibly get. But simultaneously, he's, like, a mega fan who really wants to make the Morbius Doctors canon. And those two personalities, like, constantly clash with each other. Where it's like one person wants to make it really back to basics and simple and more kid-friendly, I guess. And then the other one, as I said, wants to make, like, the Morbius Doctors canon and is basically the guy from The Interview in, like, 1986. Like, it's like he's battling with himself in a way. It's really strange.
The thing is, though... that's just the very hard difference between series 11 and 12, though, because there is a clear cut-off and a clear difference. As soon as series 11 ends, it's, hey, let's bring everything back. Let's do... It does almost feel... like, I don't want to attribute motivation, but it feels very much like he panicked.
Yeah.
It feels like he was worried that, oh, this thing I tried didn't work. There are, you know, there's been quite a lot of backlash or whatever. It feels like, by some standard, he felt that it wasn't as received as well as he would have hoped, and he panicked and went the entire opposite direction. Because series 12 has a big, like, surprising reveal, like every 2 episodes at least.
Yeah, to me, I've said this before as well, and people get really annoyed when I say this. I think Chibnall is more obsessed with lore than Moffat is. And I just think that Series 11 was him restraining himself. I think he knew that he had to do a series that was, like, simple, but as soon as that was out the way, he's like, right, time to make my fanfic canon. He pulls out his book from like 30 years ago and goes, right, the Doctor is actually not from Gallifrey, etc. And like that's how we got the Timeless Children. And I think, in my head, Series 13, at least what I think Chibnall will do, is he'll carry on in the more Series 12 direction, but he won't go as far with the lore stuff. So it'll sort of be a weird blend of like the two extremes. Like that's how I envision Series 13 being, at least going off what we already know about it. Like it seems that that's what he wants to do with it.
But the thing is, though, like I would be very happy to watch a series that's entirely back to basics, as like a series of 10 standalone stories with character arcs that are developed through those stories. But each one can be enjoyed on their own, and they're back to basics, simple, all original monsters. Just as much as I would love to, I would love to watch a series that is all about these returning villains and returning heroes, and everything is super high stakes, and like all of canon is at stake.
Yeah.
I would love to watch both of those series, like written well.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem. It's that he can't pick one, and neither of them are written particularly well. So you end up... Because, like, a lot of people said when Series 11 ended, the problem is that it didn't have any returning elements or villains or anything like that. And I'm like, I really don't think it is. I just think...
No, it really isn't.
It just wasn't written well. Like, I think, again, obviously Series 5, it's not, like, all new villains, but it way more effectively establishes a new sort of world and tone and vibe. Obviously they don't go as far into it as Series 11 does, but it feels very distinct to its predecessor. Whereas to me, the Chibnall era isn't its own proposition. I think it's just more Doctor Who.
Yeah, it does very much feel like Series 11 went, and then here's some more.
Yeah, exactly. I think as well, especially when you compare it to Series 10, which is like the direct predecessor, and also simultaneously acted as sort of quasi-reboot, in the fact that, like, that one sets up a new mystery with the vault, even though I think the person who's in the vault is really obvious, and Moffat shouldn't have tried to make it out to be such a big mystery, but that's besides the point. They still have a new location with the university, they have a new companion who's completely different in the form of Bill, and that feels more effectively refreshing than Series 11 does. Series 11 just feels like more of the same. Like, distilled.
Series 11 feels like they distilled Doctor Who into... they distilled it into its purest form, insofar as they've removed the good and the bad in many ways, but there's still a lot of bad in Series 11, but they've removed what normal kind of bad you get with Doctor Who, which is, some Kill the Moon level stuff, or...
Yeah.
You don't have a Kill the Moon in Series 11.
No.
I guess there are a lot of parallels between Erectus in the UK and Kill the Moon, in terms of why it's not very good.
I'd have to rewatch Kill the Moon, to be honest. It's been a while since I watched it.
I understand why.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of like the late, obviously like a lot of the Capaldi era. I'm not a big Capaldi era fan, so for me, I tend to try and block a lot of it out. But it's like at the same time, I think with the Moffat era, I think you got big ideas, they just didn't always work. With Chibnall, I don't get the sense that he has big ideas. He just is quite happy being... is mediocre harsh? I don't know. Like, that's the word I was going to go for.
I don't think it is mediocre. I think it's bad.
Yeah, well, no, that's fair. But I think in his head, he doesn't strive for anything above...
But yeah, I feel that he is striving to make a run-of-the-mill series of Doctor Who with Series 11. With Series 12 is a different story.
Yeah. What would you say he was striving for in Series 12?
I think he was striving for one of the biggest events in the show's history. I think he was striving to make event television, water cooler moments.
Yeah.
Because, like...
I don't think he succeeded in that, but that's... Yeah.
Fugitive of the Jadoon has more big reveals in it than a lot of series of the show do.
Yeah. Yeah, because thinking about it, you've got the return of Captain Jack, the introduction of the Ruth Doctor, the establishment of past Time Lords, which, by the way, obviously I know that, you know, bringing up continuity in Doctor Who is about as useful as, like, I don't know, talking about, like...
Continuity in Doctor Who would be the metaphor.
Yeah, exactly. That was it. You get what I'm trying to say. It's not very useful to talk about continuity in Doctor Who, but isn't, like, seeing Time Lords pre-Time War a time-locked thing? Like, I mean,
that's the question, right? Surely there's a reason it's never happened before, so it happening now feels off.
Yeah, because I remember in Day of the Doctor, they, like, go, oh, this is time-locked, we shouldn't even be here. So then in Series 12, you have, like, Gat, who is, like, a pre-Time War Doctor, and maybe even a pre-what we know of the Time Lords, Time Lord, I should say, rather than Doctor. And yet, there's no sort of, like, sense that that's something that can't happen. It's really strange. Also, the fact that the Doctor can just easily pop to Gallifrey now. Like... In Series 9, it was, and I hate Series 9, but I mean, at least in, like, you know, Heaven Sent to Hellbent, it's established to be a really hard thing to get to. Whereas in Series 12, it just looks like something she could easily sort of, you know, I mean, maybe the TARDIS has a bit of, like, hesitation in Spyfall Part 2, but it's not a lot. It looks quite simple to get to, if that makes sense.
Well, my assumption had been that since Hellbent, the Doctor can go back whenever they want, but just didn't.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that might be more Hellbent's fault for not really establishing, like, whether or not that is something that can happen or not.
A lot of things are Hellbent's fault.
Yeah, that is true. Basically, Clara ending is Hellbent's fault. Or just Clara in general. Because something that I've always hated about Hellbent, and that's a complete tangent and a half, but, like, the fact that her arc throughout Series 8 and 9 is that being like the Doctor isn't a good thing, and that she shouldn't try and be like the Doctor. And then, at the end of Hellbent, she gets rewarded for acting like the Doctor with her own TARDIS and companion.
Yeah.
That's completely going against the entire arc that you've set up for Clara. Like, what? And Harbo, because me and Harbo have spoken about this before, and he said to me, well, why should someone be punished for feeling like the Doctor? And I'm like, well, I don't know, ask Stephen Moffat. That was his whole arc, was that people shouldn't be like the Doctor. So, yeah, I hate that arc, because if you're going to have the arc be to not be like the Doctor, and then have the character end up being like the Doctor, that's just a really poorly executed arc.
I also don't want to listen to the spin-off about their adventures.
I know. As well, like, the fact that she basically has immortality as well.
Yeah.
Because, like, she can... people say, well, she has to go back eventually. It's like, well, yeah. Theoretically, the Doctor has to return the TARDIS eventually, but, like, that's not going to happen, is it?
Theoretically, the Doctor has to die eventually.
Yeah. And it's not going to happen. Theoretically, the Daleks have to go extinct eventually. But it's not going to happen, you know?
I really wish that there was... outline. I wish that Doctor Who did more outlined events that happened in the world, and then the Doctor pops up in, like, certain times in those events. Because, like, the Cyber War has been, like, an event that is established. It happens, but it's always, like, completely different every time we see it.
Yeah.
I really wish that the Daleks, they're just like, they just pop up wherever they need to now, and they have done for a while. I really do wish that in the Doctor Who world had established that, okay, so the Daleks, the genesis of the Daleks, that takes place in, I don't know, what would be 1850 on Earth. The Daleks, they do a few crusades. The Time War happens like 2,000 years into their history. And then after the Time War, they pop back up in this time. And then they have an empire for a bit, and then it gets destroyed in this time. And like the Doctor you can still have Dalek stories because the time travel. Just like you can still have stories. We know what happened to the Roman Empire, but you can still have stories set in the Roman Empire.
Yeah,
I wish
true.
I wish they did the same with their fictional
Yeah.
established universe elements. So
Like,
that
it's
we know
weird
what
that
happened to the Daleks, but you can still have stories about them.
like it's weird that Doctor Who, by and large, takes place in chronological order. Like,
Yeah.
River's probably the only exception to that rule, and even then, it becomes obvious where they are in the timeline as time goes on. Um, so yeah, that is kind of strange because it's weird in the classic show as well, where the Master and the Doctor just meet in perfect sync.
I mean, that's
Like,
the kind of stuff that has to be like headcanoned as the TARDIS doing it on purpose, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah. Like, at least with like when they reintroduced the Master in like series 3, it's not intentional for the Master to be there. Like, they just happen to go to the same hiding place, which is the end of the universe. So like, you can buy that a bit more because that is somewhere logically two time travelers would go to hide. A bit of a dangerous place to go and hide, admittedly, but
Don't stay there too long.
yeah, you're probably going to end up dead. But the skies are made of diamonds and all that. But yeah, that is strange. But I guess, like, as well, that's another thing. Like, the Whittaker era doesn't even explore time like the Moffat era does. It doesn't explore the idea of being a messianic figure like the RTD era does. It doesn't really explore much of anything. I guess that's the problem. Like,
Very much so.
I think if, as I said to you like earlier, if the era was more about the Doctor becoming less certain in her abilities and basically having this bigger family unit as a means to get her confidence back up again, and it was like a sort of her support unit to make her feel better, well, that might be a good arc and a different arc to what we've seen before. But the problem
they
is,
just sort of don't do that.
yeah, they never put in the legwork to do that. And we can say this now because the family pretty much gone, bar Yaz. Like, it never happens.
So, like, yeah, a lot of people have posited to me that the Doctor is nervous now around her new companions because she lost Bill just before meeting them, and that would be cool if they did that.
Yeah.
If they ever characterized her in that way, that would be great. And like, there's a reason for her to have developed more nervously, and then we can have an arc that explores first of all why she's nervous, and then maybe gets her back on track to being more confident again.
Mm-hmm.
And like, because like traits like that, I'm absolutely happy with. People will, whenever you criticize Doctor Who now for arc, like era-wide problems, people will tell you don't like change.
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing is, the Doctor changing, I'm very happy with. But when you've got traits that have remained consistent throughout every regeneration that are character traits, not like, the Doctor's never worn a yellow coat before.
Yeah.
He has, but, character traits that have been consistent through previous Doctors.
Yeah.
I'm happy to change them, but as with any character, you probably do that via an arc.
Yeah. No, completely. Yeah, I completely agree with you there. Like, obviously, with Tennant, the Doctor had never really been depicted as a sort of messianic figure who realised that, oh shit, I can do stuff with this power.
Yeah.
But the way that's done is not only gradual, but it fits into the arc, and then it culminates in him realising that that's not the right thing. And obviously, I'm not saying that you'd have to do an arc in which, by the end, the Doctor would have to be like, being nervous is bad, because that would kind of send out a really wrong message. But more so, like, if you do it gradually, then it works. Like, I think a lot more people, especially, like, people who'd watched the show for a long time, would have had a lot more issues with Tennant's Doctor if you'd have started out being like, I can do whatever I want with time. Time is fine, and it will. But like, that's not how he starts out. It's just a gradual thing that happens because of the things that happened to him during his life.
Like with any character.
Like with any normal functioning character who develops over time.
This is why people don't like the Sixth Doctor, or didn't on his TV run.
What? Because he didn't develop that much.
Well, because he didn't develop into who he was. He just suddenly became a twat.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Like you've got, I mean, the Doctor is like from 1 to 5 becomes more and more compassionate with each incarnation and more understanding of people and more sort of emotionally open and more so a person that you can talk to comfortably with every passing life. And then 6 resets because they were nostalgic for the first Doctor, and it sort of misses all the context.
Yeah, which maybe why when I first watched 12, maybe I felt slightly the same. I mean, the Doctor becoming a darker figure had sort of been established in the Snowmen, but again, he'd sort of gotten out of that rut by the time you get to Time of the Doctor. So him going back to where he was in the Snowmen, I think to me when I was first watching it, bearing in mind again 11 was my favourite, so maybe I just had a bit of bias, but like, I always found it a bit jarring going from, oh, I finally got out of being depressed to, oh, I'm depressed again. It's like, you kind of just did this already, like, a series ago. And I know that a lot of the ideas that the Series 8 was based on came from what they were going to do with Smith's character. But I think even then it would have felt like a bit of a retread.
Well, I mean, like, if he didn't... if they gave him another... If he had another season, I feel that it probably have gone quite differently, and he wouldn't... The arc could have just happened more slowly, where he cheered up again.
Yeah, maybe the Snowmen, like, would be dragged out a bit more across the next 2 series.
You know, I also worry that a Series 8 with Matt Smith would have been Series 7C, and I don't want to see Series 7C.
You know what? I kind of want to see a Series 8 with Matt Smith in it, though, purely because I would want to know where they were planning on taking his character. I mean, I'm guessing it's just in a more dark direction, but I think it'd have felt more natural, maybe. I don't know, just...
Yeah.
It's a weird thing, like...
I almost see, I mean, Trenzalore stuff could have been like a 6-part serial as well.
Yeah. Could have quite easily been. Like, that's the thing with Doctor Who. A lot of it's paced really strangely. And, like, obviously, again, not to harp on the current era too much, but, like, that's another issue that this era has a lot, is it doesn't know how to pace things. Probably because it has, like, 50 ideas at once, and it tries to devote equal time to them. So you get this, like, awkward thing where it's like the things that need more time don't get it, and the things that don't need as much time get far too much time. It's like a lose-lose situation for everyone. Like, for example, again, Revolution is like the perfect example of this. I feel as though the prison stuff should have had more time, where the Doctor could actually, like, change and become a bit more, I don't know. I mean, I know I just sort of lambasted 12 for becoming more depressed, but anything that would give the 13th Doctor a smidgen of dimension, I would take.
It is about time for the 13th Doctor to become more depressed with everything she's been through.
Yeah, true. Like, it doesn't really make sense that after finding out that her entire history was a lie, he'd just be like, oh, I'm sad about this, but I'm alright now.
That's the thing. She's herself, except when Ryan asks, she says she's angry.
Yeah, it's really strange. Like, imagine if 9, post-Time War, was just, like, happy-go-lucky all the time, and then whenever Rose asks him about it, he's like, I'm actually really, really angry about the Time War.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you've never shown that you're angry. Whereas with the 9th Doctor, that's something that constantly runs through the series.
But at the same time... Yeah.
Yeah. No, you go on. What are you
at the same time, I don't feel that should be her reaction to finding out that she's the timeless child. Why is she angry about that? What is it about her? What is it that surprised... Like, surely she doesn't feel like that she had trust in the Time Lords that was betrayed.
Yeah, no. She's never liked the Time Lords. She's never respected their authority.
She knows what they're like. She knows she's had dealings with the Celestial Intervention Agency.
She's been put on trial by them, like on a false trial, as well. That she, like, you know, is completely, obviously in terms of, like, narratively, she's accused of something that she didn't do, on multiple occasions by them. She knows that they're not exactly reliable as people. So, but also equally, I don't think it makes sense for her to be like, I'm so much more than you, Master. Like, that just doesn't seem like the sort of thing the Doctor would ever say to the Master. Like, she's always been fully aware that the Master is very insecure, and that's his, like, sort of reason for acting the way that he does. And, like, the David Tennant Doctor, comparatively, is fully aware of this. So he says that he forgives him and that he, would travel with him and stuff. He wants, he wants to help the Master feel a little less insecure and more comfortable with him. Whereas with 13, it's just such a one-dimensional hero-villain dynamic where it's like, oh, Master, you're so evil. And it's like, well, yeah, but that was never the only thing going on there.
Yeah.
And, like, obviously in terms of, I don't hold the fact that they didn't carry on the Missy stuff. But, like, I mean, a line would have been nice.
A single throwaway line would have been a step up.
Yeah. Like, I would have taken that. Because, like, I think the whole Master thing, it comes back to a larger problem. Where I think that there is only so much you can do with the Master as a premise. But that's, like, because I think in himself, he is quite a dated concept. He's essentially a sort of Bond villain, Moriarty type, dark version of the protagonist, which is kind of a basic character where it's just the main character but evil. But the problem is, if you deviate too far from that, it feels like a completely different character. But if you stay too close to it, the character feels stagnant. Because, for example, when John Sim was the Master, people were like, oh, he's too crazy and wacky and different. I'm like, well, you can't just have Roger Delgado every time. Like, but then equally, when you do a more Roger Delgado type Master, it feels just the same. And it's, yeah, the Master's a weird one.
Honestly, I feel they should have held off more on the Master by now. I do feel that the only reason the Master is still coming back is because he's iconic.
Yeah, basically. It feels as though, like, to me, if I was, like, taking over from Chibnall, heaven forbid they give it to me, I'd have not brought back the Master. I'd have left it, probably, to be honest.
Yeah, I wouldn't have brought back the Master.
Because it just felt like their story was sort of over.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't really feel like there was much more you could have done with it, and if Series 12 was anything to go by, they couldn't, really. There isn't much more. He's just sort of a blend of, like, the classic Masters and the John Sim Masters, which is things we've already seen before. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the Sacha Dhawan's Master, but that's purely because of his performance.
Yeah.
Like, as a character, he's not a unique proposition, really.
He's just... It's the same, and then there was more.
Yeah, exactly.
And as well, the thing that irks me is it's so soon after the Missy arc.
Yeah.
They gave it, I'm sorry, hang on, like 11 episodes.
Yeah, before they reintroduced.
Which is less than a normal series of the show.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, like, because the problem is, there is the argument that you can't hold the current showrunner to things that the previous showrunners done. And while I do agree to an extent, it does feel strange that it's just never acknowledged. Because I think people these days expect television to be more serialized and to be a bit more like an ongoing narrative. Whereas I think Doctor Who still... And I know that, like, part of the reason it still survives is because it constantly changes. But that doesn't mean you have to completely ignore everything that's happened before.
No, yeah, that's the opposite of always changing. It's reset. They pressed a reset button.
Yeah.
Constantly changing would be actually not bringing back the Master and doing something new and bringing back, introducing a new villain, which they tried and didn't really.
Well, they've tried multiple times with that, and it never really worked out for them. But again, I think that just comes down to a lack of ability. Like, for lack of a better term, like Tim Shaw is the closest this era has to, like, a villain that is
its own
and isn't a complete failure. And even then, I thought they're a serviceable introductory villain, you know, on the level of, like, the Exci.
Yeah.
But, like, they're not really something that could come back, or I would want to come back. And then in like Battle Around Skorav Kolos, when you have him being the penultimate villain, I'm like, really? The average introductory villain you had in World You Fell to Earth, that's your big finale? Okay.
Well, I mean, like, you could do stuff like that. You could, if he wasn't the focus of the story, and it was Graham's reaction to him being the focus of the story, which is sort of what they try.
Yeah.
Then you can do it. You know, he doesn't need to be anything other than a facilitator for how the heroes feel.
Yeah.
But no one's really sure what they were trying to do in Battle of Ranskorav Kolos.
I think I stand by this. Battle Around Skorav Kolos was probably the worst finale of all time. Like,
it's certainly up there.
It's got to be, like, one of the worst, because it's just, like, yeah, I mean, Timeless Children is also up there, so it's hard to sort of, but I mean, at least, like, Timeless Children I don't fall asleep at. Maybe that's because I'm more interested in the show's lore, though. Like, I think, I genuinely want to know, like, what it would be like for a general audience to watch
the Timeless Children.
You know, I may do it one day. I may make a video. It's like, my mum watches The Timeless Child. And it's just watch how many questions she asks. Because, like, yeah, I think when an audience can't follow what's going on, I think that's when you failed at your job. Is when the 90% of your audience don't understand what's going on. And as well, like, I watched the opening of Revolution of the Daleks. I was, like, I was sort of at, like, another house when that came out. And I watched it with, like, some, like, family members, the opening sort of 20 minutes. And they were, like, constantly asking questions, like, why is there another TARDIS? Why? And like, people will say, well, that was in the last episode. But like, I think it's for a throwaway bit of TV, which, let's face it, Revolution of the Daleks is the most throwaway bit of TV.
Yeah.
You shouldn't really need to know that much going in. Like, Voyage of the Damned, you don't need to know that much going in. The Doctor goes on ship crashes. That's it. And that's all you sort of need to know about that. There's deeper stuff going on if you look for it. But as a general audience, that's all you need to know. Whereas Revolution, it ties so heavily into the previous episode while simultaneously ignoring the fact that it exists. But then equally as well, you've got, like, the fact that Timeless Children came out in March. Revolution of the Daleks came out in, like, January. There's almost a year in between those.
And they knew that was going to happen as well.
Yeah, it's like you can't expect people to know something that happened a year ago and to have an intimate understanding. Like, fans will, but general audiences aren't going to remember that.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, that's bizarre to me.
It's like, I would have loved if they'd just done a Christmas special prison thing, and then they go back to the fam for series 13.
Imagine if the Doctor had, like, Christmas dinner with all the aliens.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Like, that would be so goofy, but, like, equally really fun to see as well. You can have, like, the Jadoon be, like, the little cafeteria workers handing out, like, the little bits of, you know, food and shit, and then, like, you could have, like, the silence going up, and I don't know, it would be dumb, but it would at least be fun to watch.
I mean, like, you could do some really good character writing with the Doctor in prison and getting to know, like, the cellmates or whatever.
Yeah, like, maybe even befriending, like, some of the aliens.
Yeah, you know, the ones who committed the least violent crimes.
Yeah, like the Ood. Like, what did an Ood actually have to do to get in there? Like, that's my question.
Like, that's a really interesting idea as well. It's like, and yeah, there is so much stuff you could do. It's like, I imagine the Doctor, like, sort of pick going through. It's like, what did you do? Oh, I killed 3 people. Okay. What did you do? It's like, oh, I committed a violent assault. Oh, okay. What did you do? I committed tax fraud. You'll do. Let's be friends.
And as well, like, you know, with Captain Jack, like, he's kind of a criminal, and the Doctor's still friends with him. So
yeah,
logic would dictate that she could also be friends with one of them. And I mean, they sort of have it a little bit with the little thing that she, like, has a name for. But, like, that's it as far as, like,
it's all on the surface.
Yeah, it's not ever like established. Like, imagine an episode where it's just the Doctor and a Pating like hanging out, and they've got to like try and figure out a way to get out. Like, it would be goofy as hell, but like at least it'd be creative. Like watching Ipating and the Doctor try and figure out a way out, or even if she like puts a team together and it's like Time Heist. I'm not even a big fan of Time Heist, but at least that's a cool idea.
It's like the Weeping Angel is there, so they could have a story. Like they could use the Weeping Angel as an escape method if it sends them back somewhere.
Yeah,
and they could. That you could figure out a really cool story with this, where they've got to get like everything together and figure stuff out.
Yeah, but instead, we get, here is Blue Ball, Doctor. Yeet, and then they run away. That is.
And and I said the arc in prison does nothing for the story at all.
No, it's completely superfluous. It's there to be a nice visual, essentially. It's like,
I feel like it's there for the promotional material.
Yeah, pretty much. It's. That's what annoys me about like the era more than anything. It's like you can see the parts where it's almost good and it's almost got an idea. It just never commits to it, and you're like, you're so close. It's like, watching. The
thing is, I don't have faith for this era for them to execute well on the things they do commit to, because if they committed to the prison arc, you'd have one character going, "I'm in prison and I don't like that I'm in prison." You'd have another character going, "I like to kill people and I think killing people is good," and you'd have the Doctor saying, "I don't want to be in here," and it would all be this explicit dialogue and very surface level characters who are one note.
I don't even know who I am anymore. That's what the Doctor would be saying. Just, I don't know who I am anymore.
Yeah,
that's it. That's all she would be saying.
It's like as well. I don't feel that the Doctor. Because we were talking about how the Doctor was angry in response to learning that she was a timeless child.
Mm-hmm.
What is the reaction you feel the Doctor would give to that information? Because she wouldn't be betrayed. She wouldn't feel betrayed by the Time Lords, surely.
I feel like she'd be sort of... I feel like if, from what I know about the Doctor, like, they might make it a sort of sarcastic thing. Where it's like, that makes sense. They've always been a bit... shitty. Like, they wouldn't say that, but you know what I mean. I feel like the Doctor would deliberately... Maybe it would affect them. It depends on, like, the incarnation. I feel like if it was 4, he would laugh it off. Like, 4 would just not give a damn at all. Like...
Yeah.
Especially season 18 4, but that's that's more Tom Baker's fault than anything else. Whereas, like, Chris Eccleston... he might be like, wait, so I've spent all this time regretting the things I did to you, and now you're going to tell me this? Well, screw you then.
It's very much dependent on what the Doctor's going through at the time as well.
Yeah. But like, I generally think pretty sarcastic and like, well, yeah, of course they'd do that.
Yeah, because there's no way the Doctor should be surprised what the Time Lords did. The Doctor remembers that time when they tried to destroy reality.
Yeah.
Like
the end of time itself.
I feel like lying to her about her ethnic background, I guess you'd call it, is not as bad as the things she's seen them do.
Yeah, like isn't it implied that in the Time War they became just as bad as the Daleks? Like, we never actually get to see that realized, but the implication
it's explicitly stated.
Yeah. No, it's stated explicitly that they become as bad as the Daleks, which would probably mean that they do some pretty fucked up shit, like, for lack of a better
Definitely.
term. And, like, the worst thing that she's seen them do is, they hid the fact that they met me when I was a child and I was regeneration, and, that's like, terrible. It's like,
the Doctor could have, like, a new outlook and stuff about, I'm not even the species I thought I was, that's... weird, and I feel different kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I feel like it would be more sort of passive reflection than this sort of deep anger. Because what has she got to be angry about?
Yeah. You know what would have made that retcon make like sense? Like the only thing I could think of that would like that retcon would maybe influence is that maybe that could be the reason she's so shit at piloting the TARDIS. because it's like not her species' creation. Like, I still wouldn't overly like it, but at least you could make the argument that that could be a retcon that would feasibly work given the circumstances that we have. Like, obviously, I know it's established that Time Lords, they fly at 6 anyway, but still, you get what I'm trying to say. Like, that would have made more sense as an arc where she, like, feels like she has to relearn Time Lord, like, technology, now that she doesn't know, like, now that she's not one of them anymore, she has to, like, you know, go on that arc of discovery of their, like...
But she also can't be that different from them, because, like, she can do contact and stuff, and she can...
True. And she's also must have had 2 hearts. I know
Yeah.
5 hearts for some reason. But yeah, she must have had 2 hearts. She must have been...
And, you know, she registers as a Time Lord when she's scanned by people in the show.
I mean, the only logical thing I can think of is they basically used a chameleon arch thing to make her like a Time Lord from the get-go, and they just thought would reset her. But then, like, that's never stated either, so that's a lot of just guesswork on my part.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing is with the Timeless Child is there's loads of stuff you have to headcanon. Remember how River Song regenerates?
Yeah.
And the explanation we're given in that story is because she's been exposed to the time vortex, but now regeneration is a genetic trait.
Yeah.
Which means objectively she's the Doctor's daughter.
Ew.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's weird. But then equally, I mean, could you, like, I mean, I guess... Yeah, no, actually, I can't even justify that. It's, yeah. That's what... Yeah, no. That's...
That's just the funniest implication of the Timeless Child arc.
That and the fact that, like, if, you know, there's the whole thing of the Time Lords giving him, like, new regenerations, like, if that's something that's genetically hers, why would you need to give her more of it? Or him at the time?
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's very much like, it feels like, oh, here's your placebo pill, mate.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what it feels like. It's like, this is something that I already have, but here's more of it anyway. It's like, okay. Huh. And people will say, well, actually, they probably limited her regenerations, which would explain why the limit is in Time of the Doctor. I'm sorry, but how do you limit something that is naturally generated by your body? Like...
It's like, if they said that, then I'd be like, sure, I guess.
Yeah, even then, though, it would be like, you know, can you imagine getting to a point where they can, like, limit the amount of blood your body produces? Like, that's the sort of level that would have to be at, where it's like, yes, they can stop you generating blood.
It's like, I can buy it if there's like, yeah, we went in and modified some stuff, and like, sure, Time Lords can do a lot of stuff with crazy technology.
True.
It's just like, why?
Yeah, it feels like it's adding extra steps for like no real reason.
Because it feels like, and it is, this is something that's been stapled on.
Yeah. I think what do you think will happen to it? Like, if you had to guess,
think it will go the same way as the Doctor being half human.
What, just sort of not be brought up again?
Yeah, I think it'll be like, that was weird. Anyway.
Yeah. I think, like, might be for the best. I mean, like, at least, like, half human, though. I watched Davis's Broke Canon the other day, and, like, at least that opened the door for, like, to explore new characters, and, like, the Doctor's heritage and stuff, and maybe that's why they gravitate towards Earth so much. Whereas with this, it's like, what does this actually do? Because the Doctor's admitted that it doesn't change anything about them.
I assume that we're going to get the implications of it in Series 13. I assume we're going to get stuff about the Division. We're going to get more previous Doctor, pre-Hartnell Doctor integrations as well.
But I think
if there's not at least one, either Ruth Doctor story or another incarnation of the Doctor introduced in Series 13, I'm going to be very surprised.
But I think, like, the show thinks I care more about the Division than I actually do. Like,
yeah, I don't care about the Division.
I really don't give a damn. It's just another shady Time Lord corporate. I'm not bothered. The Time Lords have always been shady anyway. I don't need to learn about another shady corporation. Oh, division or whatever you want to call it. I'm not bothered. And in terms of like the Roof Doctor, honestly, I just sort of would prefer it if she was the next one along. But
yeah,
like that's wishful thinking, and it probably won't happen because the whole point of a regeneration is to gain like that surprise factor, and I don't think the BBC would be willing to give it up. But honestly, the ideal thing for me would be if Chibnall was staying, like if he is staying beyond Series 13, which is looking like he is. I would have Ruth be the 14th Doctor because at least I give a damn about that character, and she has a unique backstory, and a nice looking TARDIS. That's
But more so with that, I feel like with Chibnall introducing surprise doctors, and he has committed to them being pre-Hartnell now. I feel like now he's got an excuse to do a big reveal whenever he wants of this incidental character was actually a secret pre-Hartnell Doctor. And I feel like we're definitely going to get another one of those.
But that like is going to severely limit like how special that feels.
Yeah.
Like it worked in Fugitive because no one expected it. If people go into a series expecting another Doctor to pop up, it's not going to nearly have the same amount of impact. And even
unless it's Paul McGann.
Yeah, true. Or like a previously, existing Doctor coming back to crossover with 13 that like the audience actually gives a shit about. I.e. like 10 or 11 or whatever, or one of the classic ones. Like I think they've perfectly established the idea of Seven coming back because he was great in that season 24 trailer, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love it though. But to be honest, equally, I don't really want... Like, this is a problem I have with Doctor Who at the moment. It's far too reliant on its own past. Like...
Definitely.
Like, way too much. Like, this is why in a future video I've got coming up, I'm proposing, like, a sort of reboot. I say reboot because it's catchier, but what I'm basically referring to is, like, a more extreme version of what the revival is, where a big event happens which causes a change in the universe, leading to the Doctor going on this like sort of new journey, and it's got new origins for some of the villains, and it's basically a bit of a not a complete reset because like obviously all the stuff that happened before still happened, but it's a bit of a time jump as well. So we don't really deal with which incarnation this is because I think that the numbering system is just completely. Like,
it's fucked.
It's completely messed up. Yeah, as you said, fucked. It's completely fucked. So, I think, for me, I would pretty much just abolish the numbering system altogether. Like, because when the Doctor, in, like, Time of the Doctor's like, well, yes, that was my 10th life, but I actually regenerated twice there. And when I was the 13th Doctor, I found out I had 1 billion more lives. It gets way too complicated. Like, if you ever tried to explain to someone who's not a Doctor Who fan, like, how many Doctors there are? Like,
so I've got a joke in my current video where I start doing the explanation and then I just cut to myself on the editing software and then cut out the explanation and turn to camera and go, just accept it.
Yeah.
Like, just accept that this is how it is.
And I think that's why I would deliberately make sure that, like, when I did like a sort of reboot, it wouldn't be the next Doctor along. Like, we'd imply that like thousands of years had taken place in between those two sort of time periods, if that makes sense. So like, it's not so you don't have to worry about okay, so this Doctor regenerated from this like this. I think that's why like 9 works so well. Is because you don't really know how he regenerated because it's not important to the story that you want to tell.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with like I don't think that we need to see each Doctor's regeneration specifically. Like I don't think we need to have that moment where it's like, oh, I've just regenerated and I'm crashing the TARDIS. It's like I don't think we need that for all of them. In fact, I think 13 would have benefited from sort of being established already, like when we met her, and like have the events of the story be like she's been like living on Earth for a while without her TARDIS, and perhaps she meets maybe Grace when she's like a younger, like maybe a teen or a child or whatever, and then she grows up with this family, and then when Grace dies, it would at least give like some sort of I don't know, emotional weight to that.
I mean, you could do the way they've done it currently, though. You could still have it work as it is. You just need to shift around the execution, because in concept, Series 11 is fine.
Yeah, true. I mean, I guess, like, it's just not, like, it's not that interesting of a concept. Like, Woman Who Fell to Earth, like, disregarding any of its flaws, is basically just 11th Hour again. In its, like, in terms of its superficial aspects anyway. Like, obviously, 11th Hour is, I would still argue, a more unique idea in that he meets the companion when she's a child and all that. But then, like, with Woman Who Fell to Earth, it's the same sort of basic idea of woman falls out of TARDIS into Earth, meets companions, leaves Earth by the end. And I know that's kind of the basic template of all of those sorts of stories, but, like, it just feels like there's nothing more to it than that, you know?
Yeah, very much so. And there isn't much more to it than that. It is very... what you see is what you get.
Yeah, definitely.
Insofar as there's not much else to read into at all.
No, and I think that's what for, like, fans of the show is, like, more infuriating than anything. Is like, we like talking about the deeper themes of Doctors. We've like had like a whole sort of hour odd talking about like why, you know, the Doctor being a messiah, or 11 being an old man, or 7 being like a trickster works so much better than this, because those character traits are interesting and are fun to discuss. Like, there's nothing fun to discuss about, oh, Doctor is God now. Yay. You know, it's like, that's not fun to discuss, I don't think. Like, as a premise.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to just be finished talking about, like, this era now, as well.
I can't be honest, I can't wait for it to end. I'm like, just give us new showrunner, please. New Doctor, let's just try again next time. Because as well, it feels like this era's gone on for, like, ever already. Because it started in, like, obviously, you know, she was announced in July 2017. And we're now in, like, 2021. And it just feels like it's been forever. Like, the thing that made me feel like it's really been ages was there was a thing that came up on Twitter the other day that was like, it's been 3 years since the new logo was revealed. I'm like, it feels like it's been 84 years.
Yeah.
You know, like in like the Titanic. That's all.
That's also just how time has gone recently.
Oh yeah, that certainly doesn't help. But like, I think I just want to like Doctor Who again. Jesus, you know, I just want like an era that I can vibe with. You know, and I'm very happy for the people who have like vibed with this. I just don't think it's the majority.
It's sort of a mixed bag, because it's like, you know, I'm happy that they can enjoy it, but also the more praise this gets, the more likely that we are to get something like this in the future. If this era was treated as iconic as the Fourth Doctor's was, then we would get, you know, people trying to imitate this forever, which, you know, God forbid, really.
I mean, I don't think that will happen, though, because I think, like, I know obviously like the whole ratings debate is like a debate that I probably won't get into because it fries my brain, because there's so many different angles you could approach it from. But like, I think Harbo put it pretty well in one of his video essays when he's like, it's kind of like Manchester United, you know, 4 to 5 million viewers would be fine for like most other shows, but Doctor Who, like, traditionally has got a lot more than that. And I think that's a fair comparison, like similarly to like how Manchester United, like, it's traditionally seen as a top of the table team, so them being 6th place is like a disaster, but for most teams that'd be great. I think that's a good comparison to make. Like, that's something that he made in his video essay, and it's the same with like Doctor Who, where it's like, yeah, that would be great for any other show, but like for Doctor Who, that's not really a good sign, I would say. But at the same time, looking at it against contemporaries, it's not doing that badly. I don't know, it's a mess, the ratings like argument.
There are so many factors that I don't feel it's a conversation that is worth drawing conclusions on unless you are like an expert in the field kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that's why it annoys me these days, where it's like, Doctor Who is dead, 4.4 whatever million viewers, and it's like, well, yeah, but what authority do you have to say that that's a bad number, though? Like, you are a man shouting at camera. Like, what makes your stance on this any more valid than, like, anyone else's? And they're like, well, it's true that it is a low number. It's like, yeah, but, like, there's probably more context to it than just that.
Yeah, there's definitely, because everything about how media is consumed is changing at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Like, for example, what was that show called? The new drama on BBC One. I can't think what it's called now, but it was like a runaway success type thing. And it didn't do very well on its, like, overnights, but then iPlayer, it got, like, tons of streams.
Yeah.
And, like, that's the thing, like, that's considered a huge success, despite its figures not being that great, so it's really hard to sort of quantify. Was it Tenet, or something like that? I think it was called, I don't know, some sort of...
Tenet is a film.
Oh, no, that's not it. Shit, I can't remember what it's called. It was like a runaway fucking... I can't remember. It's like a crime drama type thing, but regardless, that, like, did really well. I should get, and It's a Sin is another example of that as well, where it's like,
yeah,
it does really well on the streams. Gavin Stacey recently is another example of that. Its overnights weren't that impressive when it came out, but Series 1 was streamed like 20 million times last year, or something like that. So, it's a completely different landscape now, I guess. But yeah, I think that about, like, wraps this up unless... Oh no, I was going to ask you actually, I remember. How did you get into Doctor Who in the first place? That I completely forgot to do that segment.
So, Doctor Who kind of predates my memories. Like, my dad is a mega fan.
All right.
So, like, he would watch Doctor Who as he was looking after me as a baby. So, I grew up just, with a knowledge of what Doctor Who was in the same way that I knew, the things, other things that were going on around me all the time.
Yeah.
Doctor Who has just been a fact of life since I have known that I existed.
I've always been jealous of the people who've, like, known about it since, like, they, like, their parents grew up with it and stuff. Because, like, my parents never did. I think, like, my dad was, like, one of those who, like, remembered Tom Baker and that. And so when he saw it on like, Christmas one day, he was like, oh, you might like that. And then, yeah. But it's not something I've ever, like, had myself where it's, like, I've had a family, like, super into it. Because, like, I'm the only one who watches it. Which is, was, like, especially a curse when I was younger. Because, we'd end up having to watch, like, talent shows instead. Which I think that's...
Cursed.
Yeah, that's, like, added to my resentment of talent shows. Like, because I always used to miss Doctor Who as a result of them. Like, that and just the fact that they're shit television, but...
The highlights are worth watching, but that's because of the talent in the people.
Yeah, but, like, 90% of talent shows now, like, don't have talented people in it.
That seems like they're sort of missing the point.
Yeah, there's a little bit. But, they think, aha, people stupid equals funny. That's how I imagine the logic of the people.
It's become a cringe compilation.
Essentially, yeah. But like a drawn out one with adverts in between.
I mean, the solution is to just go online.
Yeah.
Where you can find much better and more efficient cringe.
Yeah, exactly. It's
You can probably find the best clips of the talent show and most places that you would find the cringe.
Yeah, exactly. It's just society has passed the need for talent shows. But
society has passed the need for talent.
True. Who needs talent? Am I right? Just make it up as you go along, and it's not that hard. Just
yeah.
Get good, scrub. No,
just wing it.
Oh god, yeah, no, talent shows I've just always resented for that, like, for that reason.
Just book yourself a slot on a talent show and don't decide what you're going to do until you're walking up on stage.
You know what, I might just book myself in, say I've got a talent, put up a middle finger and walk off. Like, not walk off, but, like, you know. It's just a strong statement. I know that you have to, like, get through, like, various things in order to get put on the show. So maybe I'd, like, pretend I have a talent for, like, all the ones that aren't real, and then for the real one I'd just be like...
We've got to audition with an actual talent, but surely they also put on some crazes as well sometimes. So what you've got to do is just pretend that you think you're really talented and do something.
I'll just come in dressed as Davros, because they've done that before.
They have done that before.
And I'd be more authentic than them anyway. So, that's what I will do. If you see Davros on Britain's Got Talent 2022 or whatever, it might be me. Strutting my talent of doing a Michael Wisher impression. This is a tangent and a half. This is what I love about podcasts, though, is that you can just, like, talk about the most random stuff and it can have the illusion of being cohesive. Or at least that's the idea.
You could, because, you know, it will flow from one topic to the next, because that's how conversations work. Yeah. And then you can pretend it was all planned.
Even though, I mean, I do plan, like, obviously, with these, I plan, like, talk about, you know, what you do, like, online. And, and then, like, you know, how you got into Doctor Who and stuff, but, like, I try not to make questions too rigid. Like, it's a fine balance to strike, where it's, like, example I can use is, I did a podcast, like, the last one I did was with Sophie Aldred, who played Ace.
Which is awesome.
Thank you. And I was really nervous, but I had a very specific, like, I wanted to get certain questions done because I was genuinely interested to know what the answers were. And it's the same with you. But, like, at the same time, you don't want it to feel like a bullet point list. It's got to flow naturally while simultaneously getting the parts out that you want to get out as well. I guess, like, the last thing I was going to ask you in terms of, like, YouTube stuff is you're no stranger to, you know, I mean, I'm not either, but you're no stranger to a bit of, like, internet drama and a bit of, you know, because obviously you critique people and people's content as well. Obviously, with your origins being a Sins channel, it was inevitable that you were going to draw the attention of other creators. I guess, like, obviously, what would your, like, advice be to people who have to deal with other creators in that way? Like, if...
Okay, so the big, huge mistake I made starting out, and I still cringe, like, going back to old videos from this era of my channel, is when I started to adapt from Cinema Sins, because I think it's important to let your content evolve naturally and to try new things and to stick with the things that work, and that can be, you know, your new thing, really. There are things I've done that I thought, you know, this will be a nice little neat one-off experiment, and then it went really well, and I thought, you know what, there's no reason not to do more of that, and so it's become more of a staple of what I do.
Yeah.
But so when dealing with other creators, which I did start to do, which was a tangent of Cinema Sins. I moved on to talking about some other creators as well. Don't assume the worst. Try to assume the best of the person that you're responding to. So genuinely, like, I did a video really early on responding to PewDiePie's criticism of Marvel films, which isn't very good. He says a lot of really weird stuff that I think if you pushed him on it, he'd be like, yeah, I guess maybe not, right?
Yeah.
He said loads of weird stuff about the fandom, like how he criticized the fandom for being too intense. And one of the examples he showed was a convention where loads of people were like cheering for Tom Hiddleston as he stood on stage in his costume. And I'm like, and he's just there going, why are you screaming? It's just a guy in a suit. I'm going, well, they're fans of him.
Yeah, and it's like, to be fair, that does come across as a tad hypocritical when he's like the most subscribed to YouTuber in the world.
Yeah,
and has probably
I'm sure
had to deal with a bunch of
where people
screaming at him.
cheer for him just standing on stage.
Yeah, so that's kind of a strange criticism in itself. But yeah, I do remember that video, and I think like the thing is, I think what you do that's very important is that you always frame it as it's never meant to be directed as like any sort of malice towards the person.
But there totally was malice towards him when I started. That's the thing.
I see. Okay.
Don't like. I try to frame it as if there isn't, because I know it's a bad look. But I totally like. I really overgunned it with how much of like my criticisms weren't aimed at what he was saying. They were aimed at him, like as a person, which is absolutely not the way to go. And I'm happy to now be able to say that I've grown out of that. Because, you know, like one of the first comments I make about the video is that I say that he's probably just doing it because he's not getting as many views as he used to, and he wants to present a controversial opinion so that people will start talking about him. Yeah. And I didn't know that. I just assumed it because I know I'm a bit, you know, I was a bit annoying then.
Yeah.
I made a bad faith assumption about him and just presented it as criticism, which definitely don't do that.
Yeah.
Always aim for the things being said, not the person. Unless like there are very like that's the rule that you need to know before you can break it, you know?
Yeah. I'd say the only time like it maybe becomes acceptable to break it would be if they're like personally attacking like you.
Yeah.
And then like even then you do have to be careful about it, because like I've had dealings with people, even though I'm like really small as a channel, like because of my rather turbulent backstory, being part of such a toxic community as I was. When I left, there were a lot of people who resented me for it, who also had audiences, and some of them got quite personal about it, and obviously then I did get quite personal with them because it was the only means you have of defense at that point. But there was a lot of like, I think context is always important with those things, but even then you've got to remember that like not everyone's going to be going in with that context that you have, so it's a really hard sort of balancing act, I find, where you can say something and it sounds fine in context, but when something's clipped out and removed from its context, it sounds completely different.
Oh, definitely.
And that's something that's, I think, is an important line to cross. Like, obviously, I know that in your case, like, I guess the most notorious, I guess, beef, if you could call it that, like, that you've ever had is probably between yourself and, like, No Bullshit. Like,
definitely.
That's probably, like, the biggest thing that I could, like, when I started this tangent, that's what I, like, had in mind directly.
And that's what I immediately thought of when you said it.
Yeah, and like that's that's what I was inevitably going to bring up. But I'm glad you did bring up the PewDiePie example first, because I think it's important to preface and have other examples other than just the one that people know about. Plus, like, it helps get the watch time up, so that's always good. But yeah, so I know you've probably talked about the No Bullshit drama before, but do you want to just give a brief history of that?
So, No Bullshit is a conservative political commentator, among other things. He generally focuses on media more so than politics, but he gives a lot of political takes as well.
Yeah.
He is partisan right. He says a lot of, he says a lot of very, very dumb things.
Mm-hmm.
He also, a lot of people don't know this about him, his first channel was called Brooks Show, and he made a CinemaSins knockoff channel, which I covered, as well as CinemaSins back when I did CinSins. And then I found out that he was the same person as No Bullshit, and I decided to make a video at the time, just like a little channel update video, saying, yeah, I don't really like this guy, and I don't really feel comfortable covering him anymore. And I was very overly dramatic about it in retrospect. It's because I'd never dealt with like a a political stance of my own. So it felt like at the time it was like I'm taking a stand.
Yeah.
And now it would just be like, yeah, he has really bad political takes that actually probably hurt people.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna like support him by covering his content casually as like, and then linking to it at the end if you want to go check it out. As just sort of like,
Yeah.
you know, it's all fun movie opinions. I'm not really gonna do that anymore because he also like, you know, says all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But that video came out and I posted it, and then I unlisted it later because it was a channel update video. And about a year, 2 years later, I found out that he'd seen it, and he went on a rant about it, about how I was trying to silence his freedom of speech.
Yeah, it's always the argument, isn't it?
Yeah. Which I explicitly said in that update video that I didn't want to silence him. So I made a video going, just going through all of his claims, all of which were about my video were demonstrably false. Like,
yeah,
not just that I said I wanted to, not just like that I said I wanted to silence him, but like he said, I got a load of bad feedback for it, so I privated it out of embarrassment, and like all of that was just false.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't even privated; it was unlisted, and there was still links to it in several videos where I'm like, if you want to know why I don't talk about this guy anymore, I released a channel update video about it. It's like, you know, if I was hiding it, I wouldn't have done all of that stuff.
Exactly.
So I made a video covering all of his claims, and then I also got to go on a stream with him. To consult him about it.
Yeah, that was very funny because I remember the thing that made you laugh the most was the criticism he had of Infinity War, I think it was, and he was talking about the fact that like a dwarf was in it, and he was like, that's an agenda that they're trying to like push dwarfism or like, you know, disability, diversity high or whatever it was, and then you were like, but that's in the comics though.
You know, it's okay. It's like he makes the argument. It's like, yeah, they have a dwarf in it, and this is bad because it's like it's something that an SJW would want because it's representation of like several like approaches to this. That's fine if they want to do that. Secondly, it's not even for that reason. It was in the comics, which are based on Norse mythology, which, guess what, has dwarves in it.
Yeah, that was like the funniest one. That and the fact that he said that the Black Panther had a suspicious amount of women in it.
Yeah.
It's like, so his mum, his sister, and his lover, and his guard, very suspicious amount of women. All like 4 of the main ones.
All 4 suspicious women.
Yeah, it's like, what? Okay, I guess.
If I ever do merch, I might actually do a T-shirt saying like, "I am a suspicious woman."
Yeah, there are a suspicious amount of women. Awesome.
There's a suspicious amount of women in this T-shirt.
Oh, I love that. That's brilliant. I'd buy that, like just for the meme, because it was so funny because it was like, you know, apparently having 4 women in a film is suspicious. the choice of wording as well is my favorite part. Just suspicious. Yeah.
You know, I suspect this film of foul play.
Kinda sus, bro, with all your women. My God, what are you doing?
I also love as well because the MCU as a whole has a very low amount of like female representation.
Yeah.
In the main cast.
Didn't they genuinely not want to make a Black Widow film for a while because they were worried that it wasn't going to sell toys? That's something I
don't know why, but I can believe that.
I heard that was one of the reasons, like, she always had less toys than the others because like they didn't think it would sell because she's a woman. And that's why it took so long to get a Black Widow film off the ground. And it really wouldn't surprise me if that was, because that's just how Hollywood operates.
Yeah.
If they don't see money in something, it doesn't get made. That's the reality of it. Like, so, and that's what's so funny to me when people are like, "Oh, the woke agenda, they're trying to steal our Hollywood." It's like, no, they just go where the money is.
Yeah.
If the general opinion was that women, you know, someone's gonna click this up, but if the general opinion of the world was that women like aren't and they belong in kitchens, then Hollywood would mimic that. Because that's where the money
like it did for decades.
Yeah. Like, because that's where the money is. But now, people, and quite rightly, want to see characters that are a bit more independent and not just conforming to that stereotype. So as a result, Hollywood reflects what we want. They just go where the money is. I don't think it's as deep as they're making it out. They make it out to be some sort of satanic ritual. And I'm like, no, they just want to make money. And if it means that there are more women in films, then I think that's a good thing. But yeah, it's so weird, that argument. Like, now that I'm like past being in that sort of group, I can sort of see like how flawed some of the arguments they really are. Like, in terms of like series 11 as well, like the whole the Doctor becoming a woman thing, it wasn't a political statement. I don't think it was done to get some marketing. That's what I think it was done for.
Well, I think it could have been, even if it was a political statement, it was done to get some marketing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the core goal was to get more people to watch the show, ergo make more money.
And it worked for a few episodes.
And it absolutely did.
Well, that's actually a weird thing, because make more money isn't really a concern for the BBC, is it?
No, but of course they want to sell merchandise, you know. And, I mean, I know they don't, that's not their concern, but I mean, if they didn't want to make any money, they wouldn't strike any video that has their content in it. So,
that's true.
Like, I think they do like making the money.
BBC produced content should be copyright free.
I agree. I mean, it is for us, isn't it? We pay for it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, BBC.
Copyright law needs to be reworked anyway.
If you're watching this podcast, let me use clips from Fugitive of the Jadoon, please. Thank you.
I mean, I've got lucky so far in that I've uploaded all of my my video. I've been uploading it, each segment that I finish, in like 5 to 10 minute sections. I upload to YouTube unlisted as a backup, so that if my like hard drive crashes or anything, I've still got the YouTube copies. You know, basic safety stuff. But none of them have been flagged. None of them have been have had the BBC chasing after them.
Wow.
And I hope it's because I'm careful to use only clips under 4 seconds.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, the general rule I've been told is, like 8 seconds, like, the max.
Yeah.
That, like, you can get away with.
The thing I've noticed, though, is that people say that still often complain about getting copyright claimed. So I've gone for 4.
Yeah, that's fair.
And even then, I avoid going for a 4-second clip if I can. I try to stick to 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Which makes for quite a hyperactive video to watch, but it also means that it gets to stay up.
Yeah, and not be taken down.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's fair enough. Like, it's I remember I had a video essay about the Cybermen and their motivation, and basically I had Jack Wolf, who is like another sort of Doctor Who video essay.
I like Jack Wolf's videos.
I had him cameo in it, and he made a little segment about why he liked the Cybermen, and like which ones he liked. And funnily enough, he also thought the Talos ones were the best. But that's like outside the point. But he used a clip from the Moon Base, the animation, and it went up fine. And then like a week into its publication, it got like struck, or like a few days in. So I had no choice but like to cut out that segment, like a small segment.
That's so sad.
Because it's like luckily most of Jack Wolf's bit is still there. It just cuts off at a really weird point. So yeah, that kind of ruined the video a little bit. I say ruined it. It didn't ruin like the whole video, but it still irks me to this day. And you can still watch that video and it'll still have that weird cut. But there's nothing else I can do about it because, I mean, what was annoying about that is obviously, you know, I never blamed Jack Wolf for it, but it was the fact that it wasn't even something I edited. Like, that's what annoyed me, was like the fact that I managed to get it through just fine, and the thing that was my undoing was the thing that was done by somebody else. So that kind of sucked. But yeah, I don't blame Jack Wolf. I blame the BBC for being copyright trigger happy.
And they are bad for it as well.
Yeah, like it was literally a few seconds long. It's like the Cybermen were explaining like that they needed some humans to go outside, and like the humans were like, well, if they're outside for too long, they'll die. And they're like, this is no concern to us, or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like that's literally all the scene was, and it got struck, and I'm like, oh, come on, man. But yeah, I think that about wraps up this podcast. Is there anything you'd like to promote or? You know?
I mean, we spent most of the time talking about it.
Yeah, the big video that is coming.
So, you may not know, I've got a big video on the way.
Yes.
And I'd love to promote that. Just keep an eye on my channel, and it'll be there one day.
Eventually. When the stars are in the right place.
It's coming out on the 1st of January. It's gonna premiere simultaneously to the Revolution of the Daleks being aired. That's the plan. Hopefully I'll make that date.
Epic. I can't wait for the 1st of January. But with that, everyone, thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy this podcast, be sure to give it a like. Comment down below your thoughts on anything we talked about. And I'll probably put like a little call to action at the beginning because I'm trying to get like to 10k by the end of the year. But subscribe as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.
Bye-bye.